Once upon a time, in the muddy plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, there was a city with ziggurats that touched the sky. It was Uruk, and under the brilliance of the stars, which the ancients saw as signs, lived men who wrote on clay tablets, counted the seasons, traded grain, and, above all, conversed with the gods. The narrator's voice in this story begins in a temple courtyard, where a priestess lights incense and the clay murmurs ancient secrets. Fact: the first cities and writing emerged in Sumer. See archaeological notes on Sumerian inventions. The priestess is called Nanshe. She walks through the corridors of the temple of An, the sky, and breathes the same air where, according to the tablets, Anu, Enlil and Enki once gathered to decide the destinies of men. Anu, the lord of the firmament. Enlil, the lord of the winds and of decisions. Enki, or Ea, the lord of the waters and of cunning. These names resonated like a small divine court, each with its own cults and cities. The cities themselves were, in the eyes of the Sumerians, the property of the gods. Temples with fields that sustained priests and rituals. Nanshe opens a box of sealed tablets. Among cuneiform writing and stamps, there are poems, there are lists of offerings, there are myths that sing of creation, wars in the sky, primordial monsters, rivers that spring from the tears of gods. One of these stories, which later in parallel forms would influence epics such as the Enuma Elish and the Gilgamesh cycle, speaks of an ancient sea, of Tiamat and Abzu, of how the world was formed when greater forces fought. These were not just stories, they were rituals, maps of the cosmos, and instructions for living. Nanshe reads, "The figures of the narrative emerge like shadows in the oil lamp." Inanna, the brilliant goddess of love and war, whose planet is Venus. Shamash, the solar judge. Nana, or Sin, lord of the moon who marked time, and many others. A complex gallery in which each city-state revered its patron. Sumerian religiosity was profoundly practical. The temple god owned land and workers. The priest mediated between the deity and the city. And astrology, egg reading, and the recording of omens integrated politics and destiny into a single tapestry. But the story I tell here holds an enigma. The tablets often fail to tell everything, and outside the temple archives, legends circulated that centuries later would be reinvented. Some read the tablets and see, behind the images, visitors from the sky. The Anunnaki transformed in modern interpretations into astronauts or ancient extraterrestrials. Nanshe knows that academic tradition treats these gods as members of Mesopotamian cosmology, powers, divine ancestors, judges of destiny, not outsiders from another star system. Still, the images are ambiguous. A being with a horned hat, a winged figure, a king with hands full of symbols. All this raises questions that would span millennia. Note, theories of Anunnaki as extraterrestrials are a modern and sensationalist reading of the sources. Serious studies see the Anunnaki as deities of the pantheon. Nanshe closes a tablet and recounts a memory, the king who brought irrigation water and wrote the first accounts, because, after all, beyond mysticism, the Sumerians were rigorous administrators. Recently discovered archives show how bureaucracy, accounting, and centralized administration already functioned millennia ago, with lists, clay tablets, and warehouses. The same hands that engraved messages for the gods also recorded tributes, deliveries, and taxes. The thread that connects empires and rituals. But our history needs mystery, right? So imagine, on an equinox night, Nanshe finds among the tablets a different inscription, not a hymn nor an inventory, but a letter addressed to those of the high house. The letter describes a meeting, an assembly of gods discussing human labour, a plan to create helpers who would worship the deities and maintain the temples. It is an ambiguous text, written in a code of religious formulas. Nanshe feels the weight of the words. Could it be an allegory about servitude to the gods? A poem about the origin of human labour? Or something that, misunderstood, could be said 5,000 years later as proof of external intervention? She decides that the right thing to do is to tell the scholars. But first, she closes her eyes and lets the story become myth for an hour. With each verse Nanshe recites, the temple responds. Enlil's wind raises dust, and in the distant hills, a farmer looks to the sky and reads an omen in it. The stories, creation, death, return, judgment, were tools for understanding disasters, droughts, floods, wars. The pantheon was neither uniform nor static. Over the centuries, names rose and fell in influence. Kings glorified local gods, and epics were rewritten to legitimize the powerful. The Enuma Elish itself, for example, elevates Marduk to the top at a particular political moment in the Babylonian Empire, showing how myth and politics go hand in hand. At the end of the reading, Nanshe looks at the flames and thinks of heirs. Future archaeologists who would excavate the ruins and bring broken tablets to light. Curators who would place reliefs in room 56 of a distant museum. Chroniclers who would record bureaucracies that surprisingly resemble our own administrative systems. She also thinks of those who, centuries later, will transform these figures into stories of stellar visitors, reading symbols out of context and confusing reverence with technology. It is the fate of all myths, to be read in new ways by each generation. The story ends with Nanshe returning the letter to the box, closing the temple, and walking to the riverbank. There, the waters whisper ancient names, An, Enlil, Enki, Inanna, and the stars tirelessly spin. The enigma is not a single answer. It is the place where history, religion, archaeology, and imagination meet. Some will come with hammer and brush, others with theories of space travel, still others with the pure desire to hear a good story. What matters, according to Nanshe, is to listen to the tablets with respect, to read both what they say and what they omit. Because, in the end, the Sumerian gods remain, alive in poetry, concrete in clay, and mysterious as the shadows of a ziggurat at sunset.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like below and share it with your friends. I'll be back with you in the next video.